Welcome to Trial Site News. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing a story by a Trial Site News contributor and investigative journalist, Sonia Elijah. She recently covered the leaked European Medicines Agency, or EMA, emails and documents and found major concerns with Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine batch integrity, as well as discussions within the emails about the race to Authorize. And so, from Trial Site News, I am Adrian, and our episode is starting right now. So, Trial Site News recently was able to review leaked internal emails from the European Medicines Agency and meeting report between the agency and Pfizer. The EMA oversees the evaluation and supervision of medicinal products for the European Union. We received snapshots of internal EMA email correspondence, a November 26, 2020 PowerPoint presentation from a pivotal meeting between Pfizer and the agency, as well as a confidential 43-page Pfizer report was provided to us by an anonymous source because of their trust in Trial Site News' commitment to transparency, accessibility, and honest reporting. Now, the time period of the email correspondence in question stretches from November 10, 25, 2020 to just weeks before the EMA granted the CMA, or Conditional Marketing Authorization, for the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine on December 21, 2020. The FDA, meanwhile, granted the emergency use authorization for this vaccine on December 11th of 2020, with the MHRA making it first to the finish line on December 2nd. And the finish line is the key word here, as in Sonia Elijah's piece, she wrote about how the emails do reveal an intense, almost competitive-like rush to authorize the COVID-19 vaccines as quickly as possible. Now, of course, at the time, the entire world was gripped by fear of the pandemic, and the push was universal from every country to find a vaccine to protect their citizens from the coronavirus. Now, in an email from Marco Cavalieri, at the time the EMA's head of biological health threats and vaccine strategy, he communicated with urgency how the US FDA are, quote, going to rush into an emergency use authorization. Cavalieri said that the FDA has a call with MHRA in 3 hours to discuss BioNTech's CMC aspects. They are going to rush into EUA. FDA still unclear and not so easy for them to be faster than Christmas, but pushed hard by Azar and US government. Now, Azar, or Alex Azar, a former pharmaceutical executive, was at the time the United States Secretary of Health and Human Services. Now, Sonia points out in her article that it is, quote, worth noting that when Azar was formerly president of Lilly USA LLC, a division of Eli Lilly, drug prices skyrocketed under his leadership. The pharmaceutical company was also embroiled in a class action lawsuit under his tenure, where it was accused of exploiting the drug pricing system to increase profits for its insulin drug. Of course, this doesn't necessarily mean this executive was complicit in any way, but the timing is noteworthy, unquote. Now, Cavalieri's email speaks to the extent of how politics and the US government was driving the FDA's regulatory process, making sure that it was going at, quote, warp speed. However, across the Atlantic in Europe's regulatory agency, tensions mounted as the pressure to accelerate deadlines made the air and general mood tense. The pressure and anxiety was palpable in the reviewed email exchanges. Noel Wathian, at the time the EMA's deputy executive director, but who has since retired, pointed out that we are speeding up as much as possible, but we also need to make sure that our scientific assessment is as robust as possible. Let us not forget the responsibility/accountability attached to the recommendation to the EC to grant a CMA. What is also interesting is his concern to address the damage limitation resulting from the probable outcome of the EMA finishing last in this regulatory race, and his fear that this would result in public opinion and the media turning against the agency. In November 19th of 2020 email, Wathian revealed a, quote, rather tense teleconference call with a European commissioner, Ursula von der Leyen, which was, quote, at times even a bit unpleasant. This reflects the mounting pressure which the EMA staff were under to issue the CMA quickly following the emergency use authorization granted by the FDA/MHRA for the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. Von der Leyen is implicated in potentially being responsible for this tense environment with a, quote, delay of several weeks not easily acceptable for the EC, or European Commission. Now, interestingly, as we covered back in February, von der Leyen was embroiled in a scandal when a group of European members of parliament demanded her immediate resignation and full disclosure of a series of private text messages between her and the Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla. The outrage and concerns were centered around a small portion of texts disclosed, which showed her negotiating portions of a European-wide vaccine deal, unilaterally with Bourla via a series of texts. Now, clearly, standard protocols in Europe were thrown out the window in favor of expediency, and this seemingly was tied to a unified competitive pressure on all three regulatory agencies. Wathian, within the leaked EMA emails, wrote about the, quote, political fallout seems to be too high, even if the technical level at the member states could defend such a delay in order to make the outcome of the scientific review as robust as possible. Wathian points out that a potential delay of several weeks to secure a, quote, robust assurance in particular as regards CMC and safety will be met with criticism from various parties, including the media, the European Commission, and the European Parliament. He wrote about his fear that if the deadline to align as much as possible with the approval timing by the FDA MHRA cannot be met, that they will be overwhelmed from all fronts and be in the middle of the storm. And then there were the concerns with the integrity between vaccine batches. We can see here in this email that Cavalieri Marco says, "Thanks Irene, I just learned from the FDA that there are some issues on CMC to be sorted out, so I guess that if we can try to catch up would be good. I fear CMC will end up being the difficult bit. The FDA may conclude on EUA by Christmas, not earlier. Any chances we can issue CMA at the same time?" Now, CMC refers to the chemistry, manufacturing, and controls, also referred to as a pharmaceutical quality, which covers various procedures used to assess and ensure the safety and consistency between pharmaceutical product batches. And then, in an email from Evdokia, an EMA scientific administrator, we can see in more detail what these issues were and how they were in fact major concerns centered around the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. It reads as follows. Dear colleagues, this email is for awareness and to flag an important comparability issue with the BioNTech vaccine that needs to be addressed prior to approval. Issue. A significant difference in RNA integrity truncated species has been observed between the clinical batches, 78% mRNA integrity, based on which the interim analysis was performed, and the proposed commercial batches. The company claims that the efficacy of the drug product is dependent on the expression of the delivered RNA, which requires a sufficiently intact RNA molecule. The root cause for the lower RNA integrity at commercial batches has not yet been identified. The potential implications of this RNA integrity loss in commercial batches compared to clinical ones in terms of both safety and efficacy are not yet defined. On top of this, you also have a confidential Pfizer report, which was also leaked along with the EMA emails. The company states that according to Aketis Therapeutics, which happens to be the biotech company who developed the lipid nanoparticle platform for the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine, that according to the company's own general experience, a, quote, minimum threshold is approximately 70%, and that the efficacy of the product is dependent on expression of the delivered RNA, which requires a sufficiently intact RNA molecule. Now, why all this matters so much, as Sonia pointed out in her Trial Site News article, is that for the commercial batches which were going to be rolled out across the globe to have such a significantly lower level of mRNA integrity, intact RNA molecule, is greatly concerning given its intrinsic tie to the efficacy and potential safety of the product. And then you have on the very next day after the email we just covered, Veronica, head of Pharmacy Quality Office, wrote to Evdokia saying that a number of major concerns remain that impact the benefit/risk of the vaccine efficacy safety, most notably the comparability issue around the percentage mRNA integrity. These concerns are shared by most member states, and approval by the end of the year could potentially be possible if these concerns plus GMP would be resolved. Now, as we see here, the difference in the level of mRNA integrity was again noted as a major concern shared by most member states, and its potential impact on safety. Veronica highlighted in bold, an approval by the end of the year could potentially be possible if these concerns plus GMP would be resolved. Now, this gives rise to the critical question: how were these concerns resolved when the CMA was granted only a few weeks later on December 21st? Well, as Sonia showed in her article, a possible way that it was resolved was Marco Cavalieri writing around the same time in an email saying that CMC issues would affect authorization, but not EUA. In any case, the issue on the mRNA content not perceived as major. Gaps are around comparability and process validation for drug substance. Unclear if GCP inspections ever done, but no major interest from the FDA. Now, this revelation is extremely concerning given that GCP refers to good clinical practice, which is an international ethical and scientific quality standard for designing, conducting, recording, and reporting trials that involve the participation of human subjects. Now, what's even more alarming is the statement that there was no major interest from the FDA. This appears to show that the regulatory agency's apparent lack of concern or even interest on whether GCP inspections were completed in the context of Pfizer's clinical trials, which was relied on by the FDA to grant EUA for the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. Now, further damning information is revealed when multiple regulatory agencies, the Health Canada, EMA, MHRA, and FDA, are all aware of the issue with the percentage mRNA integrity. Now, shockingly, the end of the email reveals that the applicant Pfizer has shared with the FDA, and us only today, an issue with visible particles in the DP, drug product, appears to be lipid nanoparticle components. Now, this is astounding to read. This significant issue being made known to the 3 regulatory agencies on November 25th, just a few weeks before the EMA granted CMA and the FDA would grant its emergency use authorization for the Pfizer vaccine. Not to mention, it was just days before the MHRA granted authorization in the United Kingdom on December 2nd of 2020. So how then was the percentage mRNA integrity resolved? Well, in that email, Veronica also wrote that, quote, the latest lots indicate that intact RNA are back at around 70 to 75%, which leaves us cautiously optimistic that additional data could address the issue. However, in a leaked report of a meeting with Pfizer and the EMA on November 26, 2020, a day after Veronica's email, it reveals that the RNA integrity specification was revised down to below 50% for drug product shelf life, significantly lower than the minimum threshold of 70% that Aketis Therapeutics had stipulated and the average 78% of the clinical batches. Now, mention is also made of uncertainties about consistency of product quality and hence uncertainty as regards product safety and efficacy of the commercial product. Yet it is baffling how lowering the RNA integrity specification would remedy that major objection. So the question has been raised: was this the EMA's and potentially FDA/MHRA/HC way of resolving the issue to ensure approval by the end of the year? Well, in another slide, the artifact states that truncated and modified RNA species should be regarded as product-related impurities. This seems to confirm that these shortened mRNA species, which lowered the level of percentage mRNA integrity, were classed as impurities. Another alarming concern arising from these impurities is flagged as the, quote, possibility of translated proteins other than intended spike protein resulted from truncated and/or modified mRNA species should be addressed. Now, the evidence in this report confirms that the regulatory bodies like the FDA, MHRA, EMA, and Health Canada knew of the differences in batches regarding percentage mRNA integrity, and because of that, the effect on safety and efficacy was unknown. The leaked Pfizer EMA meeting report raises material concerns, assuming the issue was resolved by simply lowering the RNA integrity specification, which in other words means it was never really resolved. Lowering the standards to fix the issue. Who would have thought? Now, to see the whole article by Sonia Elijah, we'll provide a link in the description below. And of course, we here at Trial Site News will continue to report on the story as it continues to develop. And that, my friends, brings our episode to a close once more. From Trial Site News, I am Adrian, and I will see you all next time.